Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and today we're going to be talking all about landscaping and more importantly, landscaping in your multi-residence projects and why the importance of that and why it isn't just an afterthought at the very, very end, despite the fact that too many people do exactly that. Landscaping is the street appeal that is actually going to give you the ability to sell your product at a premium price. Now, in order to do that today and have this conversation, we've got Gopika from SFA Landscaping. So, Gopika, firstly, welcome.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for the opportunity.
That's okay. So, firstly, who is SFA Landscape Design? Is the S your surname or is that something else?
Now, it's SFA stands for Sustainable Functional Aesthetic Design. So, whatever landscape design we do, we focus, and our main aim is to have a functional space which looks beautiful at the same time have sustainable practices.
Sounds amazing. So, you've been in practice for a while here, specializing in landscape designs for multi-res side of things. Firstly, what is the purpose of landscaping? Why is it the council are actually wanting us to actually come up with these designs?
Landscaping it's more for the council wants the street appeal and to maintain the neighborhood character and also provide a functional space for the residents, provide a recreational space and create some shade and also the biodiversity and sustainable practices as well.
So there's method to the madness of what they're actually trying to do. And sometimes it does come across as madness, but now there's a whole bunch of things and constraints that council will actually get us to work with, but we're going to try and work through that through this conversation. Typically, when somebody tries to engage with someone like yourself, what is the most common time that they do engage with you, and when do you think that they should? Because it's not necessarily the same.
No, for a DA perspective, a basic landscaping, most of the council do take the basic landscaping. But if you really want to bring your property, elevate your development, then it's good to have us on board. We kind of bring you the space that kind of promises your buyers the lifestyle and the functional requirement that kind of suits their lifestyle and just the appealing to their desire.
Yeah, well, it is functionally the very first, I guess, first impression that you get of your property is standing from the street and looking into the property. So what they call street appeal, and yet so often we think of it as an afterthought.
Yeah, that's right. A good frontage and could be a deal breaker. Anything that looks beautiful, it's going to appeal to your buyer's persona. And it kind of, when it comes to development, we think about, the kitchen fixtures and the location and, all those things. But actually, before, the journey starts in the front. So you have to appeal to your buyer's desire. The lifestyle that the development promises can be put together through a nice designed space.
Well, you touched on it well there, the lifestyle that it's actually offering. So it's not just the street appeal, but it's also, I guess, the functionality of the outdoor space that you're actually creating in the backyard of each of those dwellings as well. Too often I see that it's completely paved or it's nothing but grass, and there's been no real thought into the function of the space, but rather what do I do to keep the costs down?
The cost does matter. But then again, these days, with so much products and things available in the market, we can surely put together a smart a landscape that kind of appeals to the buyers.
Okay, so let's start to break this down a little bit. So, firstly, council has a whole bunch of planning controls, and I know that you're based in Sydney, but this is an Australia-wide audience. So planning controls we're going to talk about in a very broad sense because they're going to be very similar in function across every single state, but the individuality of every single council will be unique.
That's right. Yep.
But typically, what are the sorts of things that they're wanting to see within those planning controls? So we've got, concepts like private open space, which is, I guess, unique to the individual dwelling. And then we've got public open space, which might be shared communal areas.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, every council has a percentile that you need to provide for a different type of dwelling. So that's something called private open space in New South Wales and open space in other states. But again, depends on the size of your development. The percentile varies.
Yeah, so as an example, if we're doing a very basic duplex,
Yeah.
then we're probably not going to have much common space. It's going to be purely private open space for the private individual dwelling. But if I'm doing a 30 townhouse project, then we might have to have little barbecue areas or little picnic benches and a whole bunch of other things like that to break up, I guess, the bulk of the dwellings to actually have some break to the cadence of dwellings that are actually sitting out there.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the built area should balance out the outdoor space as well. So when it comes to multi-dwelling, there's certain requirements for communal spaces and things like that.
Yeah. So when we start to think about those planning controls, what are some of the elements that council are looking at with regards to what are they trying to achieve? So is it the size of the species? Is it the type of species itself? What are the things that they're looking for?
The council, they're looking more for the planting, the smart choice of planting, something that's climate appropriate and low maintenance, and it's water wise. It can tolerate the drought. So planting wise, most of the council, they have a list of plants that you can choose from. That's something the council kind of provide a lot of guidelines around that. The other things could be more a clear demarcation of the paved area and the gardens, which is called hardscape and softscape. So the softscape is more the planting, the garden bed, the lawn area, and the hardscape in landscape is more built form, which is like the driveways and the paved area. If it's not a permeable one, then it's called hardscape.
So what they're looking for is separation between your hard space, your driveways and pathways, and your dwelling itself,
Yeah.
like a garden bed that's kind of sits in between. That they're looking for that, I
they're
guess,
looking they're
physical
looking for
separation.
more the percentile, like you got to have certain softscape area which is so much of square meter, and a hardscape area can be of so much square meter.
Yeah.
So
So we just don't concrete everything. Those
yep,
days are gone.
yep,
Concrete it, paint it green. That's not going to happen anymore.
yep.
But how do we actually break that up? And so your role is just to then work out the best location for actually putting all of those. But are they going to be very prescriptive? You mentioned sometimes they've got a list of trees, but they're going to be prescriptive in the size and I guess the nature of those things. Are we all just going to put low grass shrubbery kind of things, or we have to put all these giant landscaped trees?
There's a deep soil planting which each council specify. So when it comes to deep soil planting, it has to be a tree. Some of the council, they specify the size that you have to install for a new development. So you can't actually put a tube stock or a small plant. So they're particular about the size of the plant that you're going to install, and then you comply with that. And when
Yeah.
I say deep soil planting or planting zone, it's just that there shouldn't be any car park or any utility service underneath. It should be a good cubic meters of soil where the roots can establish, which kind of make sure the water doesn't run off from the property. It retains the water. So those are the ideas behind why they kind of
Yeah.
want those things in the
And,
landscape.
and the key is in the name, deep soil planting.
Yeah.
So, which means that the roots are going to be deep, which
Yep.
means that what is located underneath that is actually quite critical. So
Exactly.
you're going to you're going to have some constraints with regards to where this might be able to go, because
Yep.
you may have some underground services. So, for example, you might have a sewer or a stormwater, maybe even underground electrical. You don't want to be putting that deep tree over the top of those things. So quite often we're constrained in the physical location where some of these things can go. So
Yep.
we've got to start to look at the constraints that sit on the property,
Yep.
go, where are all the places that I can't put stuff?
Yep.
And then of what's left over,
Yep.
where is the best place that I can?
Yeah, I guess you just have to have that forethought before, when before the installation. So exactly where it's going to go, with the utility plan and the architectural drawing, you very well know where things are going to be. So surely there's few cubic meters that is possible in any land for a tree to be planted.
I understand, but just picking up on your point a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
if we think of it as an afterthought, then the architect has already laid everything out for us,
Yeah.
and we have no option other than the limited space that's actually left. But if we think about it up front and go, hey, we have to account for this deep soil planting. It would be ideal if we could get it in this location to get that beautiful street appeal or that functional space out the back.
Yeah.
And then we can design around that. We might get a way better outcome
Yes.
if we've actually thought about that as part of the design process.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now, with regards to those deep soil zones,
Yeah.
I guess what size tree typically is council trying to look for? Is it something that needs to go in day one as a giant tree, or can we put this tiny little sapling in first go?
Um, the council have specification. They do mention that it has to be a 500 pot size. So when you're talking about 500 pot size, which means at least a meter tall plant, close to a meter tall plant. So where the council specifies as a deep soil planting is required, then they also specify exactly how big a size you have to install. So that's something you have to take into consideration during the design process as well.
Okay, so there's the legislative requirement with regards to the minimum size,
Yeah.
but a 1 meter tall tree doesn't look substantial day one when we're trying to sell that particular property. And so if that's at the front of our property and it's going to represent the beautiful streetscape in 5 years' time when that tree finally starts to grow up, that doesn't necessarily make that street appeal today.
No, no, it doesn't actually. So if you're very keen on a street appeal from day one, then you probably have to invest on matured and advanced planting for the installation. So it kind of works for you during the sales process and kind of appeals to the buyers from
Yeah,
the.
so we want to be thinking about, look, we've got a legislative requirement,
Yeah,
but we've also got a sales outcome that we're actually trying to achieve. And
exactly.
what we're looking for is the balance between the two to say, look, I want that street appeal and I want that beautiful space to be present day one during my sales,
Yeah.
which sometimes means thinking about that early on and maybe even planting some of those more mature trees while the construction's actually starting to happen and looking after that as we go, so that the tree has time to actually establish itself and grow in place and that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Or at least close to the construction is finishing. You kind of make sure it's all there. But then again, in the market, you get even 100 liters big size plants. So it's not that you need to plant them early to actually to be very appealing on the day that you sell. You can always get matured plants in the market and install them very close to the building construction time.
And just obviously, it's going to depend on the species and the size of the tree and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But just from a high level budget perspective, we're not talking about, I guess, massive costs here to actually put a mature tree in place. If we wanted to put something that was maybe 3 meters tall or something like that, in order to create that maybe not even 3 meters, maybe 2 meters tall. So it just looks mature. Are we
Yeah.
talking about thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars?
We're talking about let's say 2 meters. You nearly talking about thousands,
Okay.
and thousands plus. Yeah.
But those couple of thousand to actually put that in
Yeah.
might give you an extra 50 or $100,000 in sales.
Yes,
And
definitely.
that's the key, folks.
Yeah.
To sometimes we can be penny wise and pound poor. Yeah, we could actually put a smaller tree in for a couple of $100. But what is the impact that's having from that street appeal from day one?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Going for a mature tree really gives you that focal point as well. Kind of brings the structure of the building and the garden together.
Yeah. So okay, so we've I guess mentioned some of the legislative requirements in order to do this, but sometimes when we turn up to a site when it's in its raw form before we've even started our development design and that sort of thing, there's a whole bunch of existing trees already sitting on the site.
Yeah.
So what do we do to actually assess whether or not A, we want to keep them, or B, whether or not they're actually whether they're suitable, or even whether or not we can remove them if they're in the wrong location? Because a poorly located tree can massively impact the yield, but equally one that's been there for a long period of time, is well established already,
Yeah.
is going to save you those tens of thousands of dollars if it's the right kind of tree. So what's the process that we need to consider from a raw site right at the very beginning?
If there's an existing trees in your development, and if it comes under council preservation or conservation, if it's a native tree, then council approval is required. They allow certain trees to be removed, but if they are very specific about a particular tree, it comes under conservation. Then it can't be removed from the site. So you have to change your design to actually accommodate that tree. So yeah, so the tree really is something, before you even start your development application, you got to have a talk with the council, and an arborist needs to be involved as well.
Yeah. Now,
Yes. Yeah.
because we've got an Australia-wide audience and
Yep.
there are 537 councils, their approach to this is different. There's 537 different ways that they're going to approach this.
Yeah.
There are going to be some councils where no trees are protected unless they actually say, "I love that one tree," and they're going to name that one tree. There
Yeah.
are other councils that say every tree is protected and you need to actually ask us every single time, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
You need to understand, folks, which council you're actually dealing with and what their approach is to the particular problem at hand. And then make sure, as Gopika has touched on, that you go and seek the appropriate approvals before whether you even trim the tree or remove the tree. And then, as you said, Gopika, if you're in a council that nothing is protected unless it's named, then you might be able to remove that tree without a report. If you're in a council where every tree is protected, that's when you're going to have to get an arborist report in, and they're going to measure the size of the tree, the species of the tree, the diameter of the trunk at a certain height off the ground, in order to then report that to council and say, this is what is physically in place. Our intention would be to trim, remove, relocate this particular tree in order to I guess, make room for the development.
Yeah, exactly. So when you got to have the tree, then the council actually helps you to get the approval through. So you just have to make sure it's all protected. There should be some sort of protection around the tree before the construction starts.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
assuming that you can't remove it, or you actually want it,
Yeah.
then, as you said, a tree protection zone needs to be put around that. So it's protecting the trunk and the roots during
Yeah.
the construction period, making sure that no damage can actually occur to the tree as you go.
Exactly.
Now, what about opportunities to say, look, I really like that tree. It's a really good tree, but it's in the wrong location. If I could just move it into the front corner, pick it up and kind of just scoop it up and move it to the other front, other front of the property. How how amenable do you find most councils with regards to relocating the tree as opposed to deleting the tree?
Um, I think it's more removing the tree would be ideal rather than, because one, when you transfer them, it may survive or it may not survive if it's a mature tree. So there's a lot of risk involved in moving the tree. So ideally, most of the council, either if it's protected, then you got to protect in your development. If it can be removed, then it's better off you're removing it and planting, the required trees for future.
Yeah.
When the development is completed.
Okay, so good to know. So now we've got I guess the foundations of what council is actually trying to achieve and why they're trying to achieve it and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
When it actually comes to designing our landscaping right up front, there's a whole bunch of constraints that we're going to need to consider on the block from day one. So, for example, the contours or slope of the block may have some significant challenges with regards to construction itself, but also maybe some requirements for retaining walls up front. Now, in the instance where we treat it as an afterthought, then your architect is going to put the retaining wall in place for what they need for the dwelling, which may not necessarily give a good outcome for the landscaping. Whereas when we start to consider it very early in the piece, then you might be able to put the retaining wall in a slightly different place that actually achieves both outcomes.
Yeah. Especially if it's a challenging site and an odd shaped lot. If there's a lot of earthworks needs to be removed, then you're better off engaging a landscape designer or landscape architect to determine where exactly things would come, like a retaining wall, and plan it beforehand before you regret later if things don't work out the way you wanted.
Yeah. There's also going to be other particular constraints that might apply to a property. So the architect is typically going to work with the existing contours or slope of the property in order to design it in such a way that everything slopes where humanly possible towards the street, which means that often that dictates which side of the street which side of the property the driveway is going to go on, and a whole bunch of other things like that, which might then be where the existing tree might be located, or it might be, hey, we need to build up the block and kind of build it in other directions. So understanding those existing contours are quite important, but it also dictates where the driveway and the hard surfaces are going to be. So we have to be very conscious of the fact that those hard surfaces mean that water runoff is then not able to be controlled as easily on a hard surface as opposed to an area with deep planting.
Yeah, that's right. Again, the council, they also are more keen on water retention, and also they don't want the stormwater. They want to reduce the stormwater runoff from any development. So the design and all the aspects of landscaping and hardscaping needs to focus in such a way there's no big runoff from your development.
Yeah. So sometimes council will mandate that with regards to rainwater tanks and things like that. Sometimes they'll say that they want detention basins which capture the stormwater and slow that down. But a detention basin doesn't have to be, I guess, this tank that sits underneath the driveway or underneath the ground. It can actually be a biodetention basin, which is using the landscaping itself to actually work with and clean the water and slow the speed that the water actually gets into the system.
Yeah, that's right. You can, the rainwater garden or the rainwater harvesting. You can actually have you can actually tie it up with the landscaping in such a way it looks appealing. At the same time, it functionally, doesn't get the water runoff big time to the main stormwater. Yeah.
Now, in smaller projects, catering for that is not necessarily a mandate or a requirement, but the bigger the project, the more likely that you're going to have some form of biodetention basin that looks after, I guess, the quality of the water that goes into the stormwater system. So it's not just about slowing it down, but
Yep.
it's also about making sure that it's actually clean
Yep.
and the vegetation, I guess the ecosystem of the vegetation actually cleans the water before it flows into the system. So the bigger the project, folks, the more likely you're going to have a biodetention basin type outcome.
Yep. Again, it all depends on each council, what the requirement is. All these, most of the councils have some sort of guidelines in their websites to follow through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other constraints that we might need to consider is the location of the underground services that we may need to put into the site. So where is our stormwater or lawful point of discharge going to go to get off the property? Where is our sewer connection? Those sorts of things. Is there any underground power that we need to consider? All of those things might dictate, I guess, whether or not we can locate those underneath the driveway, in which case that frees up a whole bunch of space with regards to where we could be putting deep planting. Or if we can't do that because we're constrained with the physical, I guess, logistics of the site itself, it may limit the places where we can do, I guess, those deep planting type requirements that we were talking about before.
Yeah, it does. As you said, there's a lot of various ways that you can place the detention basin, but it has to follow through the council's requirement for different type of dwellings.
Yep. Now, we mentioned before, I guess, the different types of species. Council might have a list of trees and that sort of thing that they actually care about.
Yeah.
What are the generalizations with regards to the kind of species that they're actually going to select? Are they pretty much all going to be natives, or are some councils, I guess, open to more exotic species?
Some councils are open to exotic species as well. So they usually have a list of non-natives that you can plant, which is not intrusive to the environment and doesn't affect the biodiversity of the existing environment. So it's usually the council, they do mention the choices that you can pick from natives and also some non-natives.
Yeah, but if council's got a list of 50 trees that they particularly like, when you're selecting those trees off that list, you don't necessarily want all 50 of those. What is your selection criteria that narrows down that list to say how are they going to be appropriate for this particular site?
Again, depends on the matured height and width of the plant. You don't want to plant something so big in the frontage that kind of going to take the space and screens your facade and all those things. You're just going to choose a plant that's going to complement your development, at the same time fulfills the council requirement as well.
Yep. So as part of those design guidelines, that when we've got all of our constraints mapped out, and now we're actually trying to design for, I guess, that perfect design.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you're starting to do to actually get to improve the aesthetic value of the property?
Some of the strategy that we follow is the choice of the plants. So whatever, we don't look at plants just to survive. We're just looking for plants that thrive in that place. And also, we also looking at the scale of the plant. So it's not too big for that space. So we proportionate in such a way that it kind of complements the built area, soften the built area. All those things. And also we kind of frame the facade. Sales perspective, we kind of draw the eyes to the front entrance through a pathway, and also some layered look gives you kind of softens the built area and complements the old development. So these are some of the strategy you can look at. Also, sometimes lighting could be another a good feature to have. Nothing big lighting, but some pathway lighting, a feature lighting, which kind of gives you that warm glow. So kind of stands even at the dark when you are selling your development. It kind of gives you the after dark effect as well, and works as a salesperson even in the dark. So that's something I would take into consideration. And also, a turf lawn is always a big draw card. Having a bit of greenery, a lawn is also a good point when it comes to front appeal. But I wouldn't go too much. Less is less good. And also a clear demarcation of the planting area and the lawn area. Kind of when your buyers is walking in, it gives them that something. It's something easy to maintain, not something that's going to be a big issue for them when they move in. So basically, the strategies that we follow is something that appeals to your buyer's persona and gives them that lifestyle option. A promise of lifestyle is what we would go for.
Yeah, you mentioned buyer's persona, which is a really interesting one, and I think one that a lot of developers don't really think about up front. So
Yeah,
what is the demographic of the area, and what is the kind of product that we should be creating? And then based on that demographic, that is then going to dictate the kind of outcomes. So if it's a young
yeah,
family,
yeah,
then they probably want a usable backyard where the kids can run around.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
If it's an older age in place type scenario, then they're probably over mowing lawns because they've done that for 50 years of their life, and they're
yeah,
probably more looking for something that's low maintenance where they can just lock their house up, go for a lap of the world,
yeah,
and come back, and everything's in exactly the same place that they actually are. So
yeah,
understanding your buyer persona
yeah.
and the demographic of who it is that you're appealing to may completely change, I
Yeah.
guess, the design that we're actually trying to achieve out of that landscape.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you take into consideration who you are going to target, then it's easy to strategize what exactly you can do with your development when it
And,
comes to.
and that's not just from a landscaping perspective, but that should also go into the design of the dwelling in the
Yeah.
first place. So your architect and your landscape designer should
Yeah.
also be, I guess, working in unison with the same buyer brief.
Yep.
And as we touched on early, in an ideal perspective, working together at the very start. So at minimum, when
Yep.
you've got your massing diagram for, hey, where do I think my dwellings are actually going to go, we should be engaging with the landscape designer at that point in time to go, hey, is this going to achieve the outcome that we're looking for?
Yep. Yep. That would be an ideal point to get us on board. Yep.
So how many times that you're engaged does that ideal reality actually play out, Gopika?
Um, Mostly we are engaged at the end of the build when it's coming close to the build completion of build. But yeah, in an ideal world, I would prefer to be on board before even coming to the conclusion.
And what are some of the challenges that engaging too late in the process create? What are some of the challenges that you regularly see where you're having to compromise on something that you could have done better if you were engaged earlier?
I think it's more the plant choices. Some of the plant choices is not right for that space, and also it's just the focal point, giving some importance to some focal points and drawing the interest to the property. As I said, you can always give a promise of lifestyle before they step into the your development. So that's something you can achieve when you engage us earlier.
Very good. So if you were going to give one tip to everyone
Yeah.
with regards to engaging a landscape designer, what would that one tip be?
I would say, don't look landscaping as something to tick at the end of the build thing. Consider us as a part of your sales strategy. So your landscaping is going to work like a salesperson for you, working 24/7 to appeal to your buyer's desire and the promise of lifestyle they're looking for.
The same way that you would engage with an interior designer
Yeah.
in order to achieve your high sales points, you should also be dealing with a landscape architect or a landscape designer in exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And so you've got, I guess, the three trades. You've got your architect, I guess, your interior designer, and your landscape designer all working cohesively together as one formed unit.
That's right. Yeah. So having us on board will help you to accelerate your sales, increase your higher interest for your development, and speedy sales process.
Very good. Well, Gopika, it's been very interesting getting to know you and understanding some of the things that we need to consider with regards to landscape design. Now, we have lots of people just like Gopika come and present at our monthly meetups, which we run all the way around the country, folks. We run these in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. We always have an industry expert every single month talking about different issues and challenges. We also have people, we have members of our community sharing real deals. So the good, the bad, and the ugly of a project. So you guys can learn from the opportunities, challenges, mistakes, and successes of other people's journeys as they go. So I highly encourage you to not just enjoy these Sunday sessions, but also to come to a physical event. Now, these are physical, but they're also live streamed. So no matter where you're located, you could be located in Adelaide watching the one in Brisbane, or Brisbane watching the one in Sydney, for example. So make sure you actually come to one of those events. So Gopika, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a massive pleasure. And hopefully we've given some insights into people onto why we should be engaging early with the landscape designer.
Yep. Thanks for the opportunity, Rob, to talk to you and your community.
All good. Thanks. Bye
Thank
for
you.
now.
Bye.